It's a case that could have major ramifications in the United States.
A 17-year-old from Central America, known only as Jane Doe, obtained an abortion after a D.C. appeals court allowed it this week. Since September, the minor has been in federal custody in a Texas shelter operated by the Office of Refugee Resettlement. After finding out she was pregnant, Doe obtained a court order for an abortion, but federal officials objected to transporting her to get the abortion. The American Civil Liberties Union, or ACLU, representing the teenage mother, and pro-abortion groups claim the undocumented, unaccompanied minor is constitutionally entitled to an abortion. But pro-lifers reject this. We maintain the U.S. Constitution does not grant a right to an abortion, not in any case and not in this one. The Texas Catholic Conference of Bishops strongly criticized the ACLU. In a statement, the Texas bishops say, no one, the government, private individuals, or organizations should be forced to be complicit in abortion. We spoke with Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton as the case was still developing and the unborn baby had not yet been aborted.
You led a coalition of 9 states who filed an amicus brief on this case. What is your argument as the Texas Attorney General that this undocumented minor does not have access to an abortion?
Well, so she showed up at our border, she was arrested. Our argument is very simple, that she does not have a constitutional right to an abortion under the Fifth Amendment. If that's actually true, if she somehow does have a constitutional right, then that opens the door to anybody coming to our country from anywhere. And as soon as they get arrested, they suddenly have all constitutional rights. It seems to us that opens up a Pandora's box of issues that I don't think we should be addressing.
Can you clarify that even further? Because that really is the question at play. Does an immigrant who came here illegally have a constitutional right to an abortion? Can you hit on that specifically?
Yeah, I mean, it's very clear to us that the past decisions by the Supreme Court do not authorize that constitutional right. That right that they gave under Roe v. Wade, and it's been further defined over the years, does not apply to non-resident aliens, people who are not from our country, particularly those who have immigrated here illegally. They are not subject to those constitutional rights by any account so far. So this would, if this is turned, this would be a new constitutional right that we've so far never seen before.
You said Texas must not become a sanctuary state for abortions. What do you mean by that?
So we feel like we have an interest in protecting our state because we don't want, since we are a border state, obviously there would be many people, if this were a new constitutional right, that would come to our state for abortions, and suddenly we would be basically a sanctuary state for abortions for anybody in the world that decided they wanted to have an abortion. And certainly our state doesn't want to be in that position. It's an obvious problem for us going forward if somehow a court finds a constitutional right here.
Just to bring even more clarity to this case, if this young woman was not in the custody of the government, say she had an American sponsor family, would she have access to an abortion in that case?
She might if she had somebody else that was sponsoring, but the argument here is that she is in the custody of the federal government, and so she certainly does not have that right. It's a whole other question if she's has a sponsoring family and she's here, in some legal capacity. There could be an argument that maybe she does or she doesn't. That's a whole other question that we're not addressing with this case.
And to be clear about American tax dollars, would American tax dollars cover the abortion in this case? Is that procedure funded by Americans?
So in this case, supposedly there are private payers who are willing to pay, but my guess is as soon as they find a constitutional right, the next case will be a tax-funded abortion case, and we'll be arguing about whether taxpayers should be paying for abortions for people who enter our country illegally from anywhere in the world. I can almost guarantee that case is the next case.
There are 2 patients in this case, the young woman and her unborn child. We're speaking about this woman's constitutional rights, but are there any legal protections in place for her child?
Yeah, we have legal protections certainly in the state of Texas about, care. We also have legal protections that after 20 weeks you can't have an abortion. So all of those would still apply in this case, but as I suggested, we don't feel like we should even get there because we don't think those laws actually apply to her.
The ACLU and its abortion allies quickly got involved in this case. What do you believe is their ultimate goal? Is it for this young woman to become the international Jane Roe?
I think that's kind of where we're headed. I think you stated it in a very interesting way, but that's certainly what it appears to seems like the case that they want to bring forward to open the door, and the floodgates would be certainly floodgates for anybody in the world to come to the United States for an abortion. And that's certainly, I would guess, something that most Americans don't want to be a part of funding, at least.
This young woman is believed to be about 15 weeks pregnant. Texas, your state, prohibits most abortions after 20 weeks. In this remaining time span, what kind of action are you expecting, and are you prepared to take in the courts?
Well, so we're actually going to be in front of the Supreme Court, we would guess, in the end. We've got to obviously wait for an opinion by the Court of Appeals in the District of Columbia. So we're waiting on that decision. That case was argued on Friday. And so when we get a decision there, my guess is that either side, whoever loses, will apply for a cert petition with the United States Supreme Court. Whether that's granted or not, who knows? So it could be that the decision is made by the D.C. Circuit. It could be that it's a U.S. Supreme Court case very soon.
It's continuing to draw more and more attention. Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton, thank you for your time.
Hey, thank you for having me on. This is a very important issue. I appreciate your coverage.
For a reaction and continued analysis, we turn to our pro-life expert. Mallory Quigley is Communications Director for the Susan B. Anthony List. She joins us now. Mallory, thanks for being here.
Great to be here.
We as pro-lifers uphold that the Constitution does not grant a right to an abortion. And many pro-lifers make the argument the unborn child has a constitutional right to life. Can you speak more to this debate?
Sure, yeah. Well, nowhere in the Constitution does it appear that there is a right to abortion. And I think that this situation that we're in right now just goes to show that the Roe versus Wade decision has gotten us into such a predicament. Who would have imagined in 1973 that we would now be arguing whether or not a young woman who has come into our country illegally has a constitutional right to end the life of her child, no less, and that our government should be forced to oversee this and be a part of it. So I think that it really just goes to show, like, this is one of the many evils that Roe versus Wade has sowed in our nation.
Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton told us this case could open the floodgates for more people to come to the U.S. for an abortion. What do you see as the major ramifications of this case?
Yeah, well, that absolutely is a huge concern. I mean, really, the floodgates have sort of already been opened. The U.S. is only one of 7 countries to allow abortion on demand after 5 months, and this young woman is certainly approaching, during this time period, has been approaching that marker. But absolutely, you know, you talk about young women that are coming into this country illegally. There are many reasons that cause people to cross the border under cover of darkness. It's a very dangerous journey for one to make. We can imagine that there are young girls, women that have potentially been trafficked. This is just not a good situation for the United States to be set up as a place where people that are trafficking vulnerable young women can come and bring them for their abortions.
And it's not the compassionate response. You're seeing language from abortion lobbyists saying things like, this young woman is being held hostage. How do you respond to that kind of language, and what do you think really is the goal here they're going for?
This is absolutely a scare tactic, and it's supposed to distract from the reality that there are 2 people involved in this situation. There was a beautiful article in the New York Times this week, the New York Times no less, about how doctors operate on the children inside the womb for things like spina bifida, for example, and they called it the patient within a patient. And that's what we're concerned about as pro-lifers.
Can you speak more to what true compassionate care should look like for this woman and how that's not abortion?
Yeah, I think that whenever there's a circumstance where a young woman is seeking an abortion out of fear, which could be the case here, as we've seen from past articles that she is fearful of abuse in her home country, abuse from her family, we need to address the root of the problem. There are so many crisis pregnancy centers, pregnancy resource centers across this country, many in Texas and nationwide, who have been for decades responding to women in need in a loving and kind manner, saying, let me help you address the root cause. Let me help you choose life for your child, or help you to find an adoption partner, or just to get at all the circumstances, and let's address all the circumstances. That's what compassion is, really offering true freedom to make the choice for life.
Absolutely. That's so well said. Mallory Quigley of the Susan B. Anthony List. Thank you.
My pleasure.